Welcome back, Focus Learners, to another explainer. Have you ever just looked at a world map and wondered, how did the United States, a relatively young country in the grand scheme of things, become the most dominant economic and military force in human history? Right away, we usually point to incredible human achievements. We think of the drafting of the Constitution or the massive roaring engine of the Industrial Revolution. But today, we're actually going to flip that traditional idea on its head. We're going to see how the foundation of American power was actually laid down long before any human ever set foot on the continent.
Okay, let's dive into this. It's the central question we are exploring today. How exactly did a country that's only existed for a few centuries achieve such an unparalleled level of power and influence? Well, to answer this, we really have to peel back the layers of history, put politics aside for a second, and look really closely at the physical map.
When you look at the contrast between human creations and the natural landscape, things get really interesting. The real secret to American power isn't just about what people built. It's fundamentally about the land they built it on. By simply existing exactly where it does on the globe, the United States basically won the geographic lottery. It started the game of nations with an absolutely unbeatable hand.
So, here is the roadmap for our spatial journey today. We'll start with winning the geographic lottery, then look at the two massive ocean moats, travel inward to the Mississippi highway system, explore America's arable agricultural empire, and finally zoom back out to see its role as the ultimate global middleman.
All right, Section 1, winning the geographic lottery, the ultimate game setup.
I want you to think of this as looking at the natural deck of cards America was dealt. As this quote captures so perfectly, the real secret to American power isn't just about what people built, it's about the land they built it on. Over our next few slides, we're going to carefully unpack the specific, undeniable reasons why this particular landscape acts as such an unbeatable starting hand. Moving to Section 2, the two massive ocean moats, the fortress of two oceans. Let's start our journey right at the outer borders. If you were designing a fortress from scratch, you'd want an incredibly wide moat, right? Well, the US has the two biggest moats on the entire planet, the Atlantic and the Pacific. And this brilliantly illustrates the real-world impact of that immense distance. In the 20th century, while factories in places like Berlin or Tokyo were completely leveled by two brutal world wars, industrial hubs like Pittsburgh and Detroit were just humming along at full capacity. They were completely untouched by bombs or land invasions.
But it's not just the oceans offering all that protection. The U.S. is regionally isolated from major threats on land, too. To the north, you have Canada, a very close and friendly ally. And to the south, you have Mexico, which is physically separated by some formidable deserts and really rugged mountains. This extreme geographic security means the U.S. can spend a lot less energy, time, and money defending its own borders. Instead, it can pour all of that energy into projecting power across the globe from what is, quite literally, a continental fortress.
Next up, Section 3, the Mississippi highway system. The internal engine.
Moving inward to the American heartland, this is where the U.S. really pulls ahead. Because as impressive as an impenetrable fortress is, a country still needs a highly efficient way to move goods around if it expects to grow economically. And staggeringly, the U.S. has more miles of navigable internal waterways than the rest of the world combined. The absolute star of this show is the Greater Mississippi Basin. Alongside massive tributaries like the Ohio and Missouri rivers, it functions like a giant natural highway system right down the middle of the country, effortlessly connecting the Midwest all the way down to the global ocean at New Orleans.
So, why does the river matter so much in the grand scheme of things? It comes down to one massive advantage: 10 times. Moving goods by water is roughly 10 times cheaper than moving them by truck or rail. Because these rivers flow right through the heart of the country, American farmers have always been able to get their crops to market for just a tiny fraction of the cost compared to their competitors in places like Russia or China. It's an overwhelming economic advantage baked right into the geography.
The economic domino effect here is super clear. First, you utilize this impossibly cheap river transport. Second, you move massive amounts of crops to global markets for pennies on the dollar. And third, you get an absolute explosion of wealth, particularly back in the 1800s. This natural infrastructure was the silent engine that truly fueled the country's rapid and unprecedented rise.
Which brings us to Section 4, America's Arable Agricultural Empire, the fuel.
Okay, we just talked about moving food, but actually cultivating it, that is a geological miracle all on its own.
The U.S. happens to be home to the largest contiguous piece of arable land on Earth. This brings us to a really vital concept, food security. This is the ability of a nation to feed its own people, which effectively eliminates a massive geopolitical vulnerability. People sometimes call the American Midwest flyover country, but it's a true geological miracle. The soil is unbelievably deep and nutrient-rich, and the climate is remarkably stable compared to other giant land masses. Because of this, the U.S. can comfortably feed itself, plus essentially half the rest of the world. In geopolitics, if you can't feed your people, you are entirely vulnerable. The U.S. simply never has to worry about that.
Now, here is why this matters, and what you should really take away from this explainer. Look at the outcomes of this level of food security. Because a relatively small percentage of the population can grow an enormous surplus of food, it triggered a massive population boom. More importantly, it freed up millions of people from having to manually work the fields just to survive. Instead, that massive workforce shifted into high-value sectors like tech, finance, and engineering. This agricultural miracle literally fueled the modern high-tech economy. Finally, Section 5, the ultimate global middleman. The global interface.
To wrap up our journey today, take a look at the stark contrast in coastline access. We're moving back outward from the heartland to examine the unique role physical geography dictates the U.S. plays globally. The United States possesses excellent deep-water ports on both the Atlantic and the Pacific. Compare that to a giant country like Russia, whose massive northern coastline is frozen solid for half the year, or Bolivia, which is completely landlocked without any coastal access at all.
What this dual ocean access grants the United States is basically effortless global trade. Out of the East Coast ports, the U.S. connects seamlessly with Europe and Africa. Out of the West Coast ports, it connects directly with China, Japan, and Southeast Asia. This unique, centralized position on the globe transforms the United States into the ultimate, unassailable middleman of global trade. It truly has the best of both worlds.
So the crucial point is, when you add it all up, the superpower recipe is undeniable. Massive oceans for impenetrable protection, an unparalleled river system for incredibly cheap internal transport, endless fertile soil for total food security, and dual ocean ports for absolute dominance in global trade. When you stack these four geographic power-ups together, you get a country that was virtually destined by nature to become a superpower.
Nature gave the United States the absolute perfect deck of cards. The land itself was the ultimate cheat code. But, the landscape only provides the potential. Human action actually has to realize it. So we leave you with this final thought for today's explainer. Nature dealt a perfect deck, but how will the next generation play them? It's a fascinating dynamic between the hidden geographical forces of our planet and the choices we make. Thank you so much for joining me today, Focus Learners. Keep asking great questions, and I'll see you in our next explainer as we continue to uncover the hidden forces shaping our world.